who's still alive, it was born before 1928, so in her lifetime, women could not vote in this country. So again, it comes back to our thoughts, and we think we're very enlightened, and we go around the world saying you should do this, you should do that. Actually, 1928, so that was the representation of the people. There's more on that in the handout. In the 60s, there was the plate glass universities in this country, of which Strathclyde would be classed as. Stirling and Heriot Watt universities. 1970s, things have caught up again. This Equal Pay Act, this the Sex Discrimination Act, trying to bring some more equality into British society. I would argue you could trace it back to the efforts in the wars. Women in Britain played a big effort when the men went away in World War I, and also in the Second World War. Women had to fill in and do a lot of roles. So a lot of these things definitely planted seeds. But we're still getting to 1970, 75 before some big pieces of legislation are getting put in place to really level the playing field, as it were. And in the 1990s, again, further on Higher Education Act, again, this helped people of the aspirations of successive governments in this country to widen access of higher education, to get more people going to university, and this benefited, again, to go back to that issue of class, people from different social backgrounds and economic backgrounds, but also by default, I guess, helped the women. But just to finish off, before I hand over to Nikki to go from a very kind of in our backyard view to the global view again, in 2008-9, and there's a little bit more about this in your handout, we hit for the first time in this country 51% of students were female. So that's to go from 1892, 6% to the fights, the real struggles. I mean, people know a lot about women's suffrage and those struggles to get the vote, but really till this, I certainly was quite ignorant on how big a fight there was for women to get to study at this level. So it's quite a journey that we've gone on, and in 2010-11, Glasgow University of Glasgow figures, so 60% of female students of the student body are female. I just thought in the library most of the girls were studying harder than us, but actually no, it's noticeable because that is the facts, that's the figures. 60% of women make up our student body here at Glasgow. So that's me. I'll hand you over to Nikki for an international perspective and policy.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, so I wanted to give you a policy perspective on gender issues in adult and contemporary education, but I'm aware of the constraints of time. Obviously, 7 minutes is not enough time to cover all the educational policies that are relevant to issues of gender in adult education. So what I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes is bring to your attention some of the policy that I found quite interesting when I was doing my research, and then I'll point you in the direction of where you can find more stuff and browse through it at your leisure if there's anything you're interested in what I'm about to say. So, following the United Nations Millennium Summit in the year 2000, all the world leaders present adopted the United Nations Millennium Declaration. The Declaration asserts that every individual has the right to dignity, freedom, equality, and a basic standard of living that includes freedom from hunger and violence and encourages tolerance and solidarity. The Millennium Development Goals were made to operationalise these ideas by setting targets and indicators for poverty reduction in order to achieve the rights set forth in the Declaration by 2015. The Millennium Development Goals are probably the strongest set of global policies in effect today. Millennium Development Goal 3 specifically aims to promote gender equality and empower women. An educational perspective on this goal was provided by UNESCO's World Education Forum, and that was also held in 2000. The outcome of this forum was a set of education for all goals, which made commitments to having adult literacy and improving learning opportunities for youth and adults, among other things, in that 15-year time frame set by the Millennium Development Goals. It must be noted that, with less than 4 years to go, all of these goals are quite far from being met. Nevertheless, UNESCO continued to focus on the provision of women's education. I'm going to show you a little clip. and that comes from the Better Life, Better Future conference, which was actually held in May of this year. Spot the outfit.
Yeah, that's good.
Around the world. You've already heard from the Director General and the Secretary General that we know opening the doors of education to women and girls is not just the right thing to do, it is also the smart thing as well. The evidence shows conclusively that even one extra year of schooling leads to significantly higher wages for women and girls, which allows them to lift up themselves, their families, and contribute to their communities and countries. We have seen that when women and girls have the opportunity to pursue education, GDP grows for entire societies. And the benefits are not just economic. More education leads to more choices, opportunities, and useful information in how to live one's life. Birth rates, HIV infections, incidents of domestic violence, female cutting all decline when education rises. Fully 1/2 of the drop in child mortality achieved between 1970 and 1990 can be attributed to increased education for women and girls. Yet, women still represent about 2/3 of the nearly 800 million illiterate adults around the world. In our poorest communities, girls who are out of school today are still more likely than boys never even to start school. And this is a recipe for economic and social stagnation. No society can achieve its full potential when half the population is denied the opportunity to achieve theirs.
She makes it look so easy, doesn't she? You can find that full conference, there's a link on the Facebook. And incidentally, there was another conference called Girls and Women's Education, The Way Forward, held by UNESCO, and that was only in October there. The link to that is the one above the link to that on Facebook. So what do these goals mean for us in Scotland? Although not a member of the UN directly, Scotland does still have to work towards these Millennium Development Goals as a part of the United Kingdom. The Gender Equality Scheme sets out the steps that the Scottish Government will take to progress its gender equality objectives between 2008 and 2011. Under the banner of the Gender Equality Scheme, the Scottish Government's Education and Lifelong Learning portfolio is responsible for government policy for further and higher education, community and adult learning, development, skills and training. Now they have set out a gender equality action plan detailing...
Sorry to interrupt, that's 45 minutes you guys have been going so far.
We're nearly there, nearly there. Sorry, I've lost there. They've set out an action plan detailing the responsibilities, the statement of commitment to promotion of gender equality and individual action plan of each agency and directorate included in the portfolio. Now agencies and directorates, we're talking about the likes of Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Education, the Lifelong Learning Directorate and of course our old favourite SAS. The Scottish Funding Council has taken lead responsibility for promoting widening access for all further education and higher education students. The 2010 Annual Progress Report for the Gender Equality Scheme states that the Scottish Funding Council have been reviewing participation in learning according to gender as part of an overall review of its support to institutions to engage in communities. Alongside this, the SFC is working with Skills Development Scotland and others to support colleges in delivering the senior phase of the Curriculum for Excellence, and as a part of this, through subject options, will address the issue of occupational segregation. As we near the end of 2011, it will be interesting to see to what extent the Gender Equality Scheme has been effective in its set time objective. So a final point I'll make that I think is worth noting is that across the literature, both in terms of international policy and local policy on gender within education, it's mainly directed at younger learners. nearly all the reports that I read mention the issue of adult illiteracy, but few of them mention specific policy relating to advancement of provisions for adult education. You've got a handout like that in the pack. I won't go through it bit by bit. All the links that are there are on the Facebook. I'd just like to sort of point out one wee thing, the UNESCO link, which has got the conferences that I was talking about earlier. There's also a video on there about men and gender equality, just because a lot of the focus does tend to be on women. Okay, thank you.
You can all sit down and go, whoo. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do the same as we did last time, have the groups think about what kind of grades they want to give and hand their comments into the group. I want to have a bit of a longer break because I know there's people who want to go and get fresh air. So we're going to have a 15-minute break. We'll be back at just after 20 past. We're going to run late tonight, such is life.
It's fine, it's the last class. We can just
Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone.
We need to go do this and then have a break.
Yeah, so I
We
see.
need to do this and have you heard it at all?
I'll just quickly do this and we'll do the same thing we did last time.
Yeah.
And then get through to the
9-5
Yeah, I'll go into another room and we'll talk about it. Nice.
Where did you put those?
No.
Oh, did you? Right, okay.
Well,
It's quite enjoyable when you get into it. When you get into it, it's quite enjoyable.
the gender equality issues. We have the gender equality scheme. I'm interested to follow that. You go in the other room?
I think I've run some cake now.
Alright.
I've run some cake. What was I should do? You should have rushed it.
It's not horrendous. His feedback is just basically saying we put too much in it, which is fair enough.
You could have put on like 2 hours what we were talking about, it's not really sad.
Each one on its own was like
It's-
a
yeah,
presentation, wasn't it? Yeah.
He's not working with us.
I thought it was like me, but she's not.
No, I think you made a valid point, right?
All his points in there are quite valid. It's like he's not like, at no point does he say it's a crap presentation.
Does it say anything
His
good?
criticism is stuff like there's too much in it, which I would rather there was too much in
Yeah,
it than
So
too little
we
in
didn't
it.
know what we were talking about, yeah. It's a learning thing though, because
Exactly.
it's the first time.
This is the first time I've ever done a group presentation.
I've done some group stuff before, but never on this scale,
No.
like, never on in that depth. So you 4 people go away and do 4 times research
I know.
and come back. So I mean, it's
That's completely different to be fair.
400% there's more stuff than you need.
I know, I should.
But what? Probably say something and I don't even know.
I'd rather have stuck in that one.
It looks at silence, but
I'm free at this point that I don't think I was critical enough about what I was talking about. I think I just described it until I was engaged with it enough.
But
I'm going to give Mary answers for good talking.
Hmm?
I'm going to give Mary answers for good talking.
You did not engage positively enough.
it's a balancing act too, because
Well, I
we've
think
learned
like
about
it is. I mean, you do know though once you've done it, don't you? It's
I
like,
know.
I'm sure that you just go, yeah, okay, let's do it again, but take this. And
Yeah.
let's move it around.
Totally.
Have you heard anything from Jim at all, Mary?
No. going to be quite tricky.
What are you going to do?
We're going to try and do his bits, although unfortunately it's
I suppose you could just, I mean,
It's gonna be
everyone
alright.
knows he's not here, you can just talk through his bullet points, I suppose.
Aral should maybe check his emails or something, or you can check your emails and see.
I'm a little bit worried.
Well, absolutely.
I don't know,
Mm.
because it could be some family thing or
So
something.
that's kind of
What do you say?
far full of non-screen content, but that's kind of the idea, so that should be.
That's a person's opinion of how much should be on the screen though, because
It's more impactful, more powerful to have
Maybe we should be worthwhile pointing out that isn't our only online resource.
yeah,
That isn't it. That's a bit.
important so you can read the
Because
hand.
everything we've put up, well, everything I've used, I've put up on Facebook. And extra stuff is in.
If I did it again, I would thin it out, like what we did there. I think your one was perfect, actually, for
Great.
the amount of text that was on it.
Yeah.
I think mine was far too long, unsurprisingly.
Potentially,
Did we get some figures?
was that saying that?
That's some.
We didn't say what our online resource was though, because Paul said their online resource was the presentation, but our online